Hello, and as always, I thank you for coming to my talk show, Tell It Like It Is. I'm your host, Morris, man, and my co-host is
Joseph Spencer.
and today we're going to touch on a topic that's very serious, and that topic is serial killers. And we're going to focus on three serial killers, these three particular individuals, and basically kind of determine or just, talk about what makes them do what they do. And the first one is Jeffrey Dahmer. You remember him from the 80s. He not only killed these people, but he actually ate some of them or attempted to eat some of their flesh. And then John Wayne Gacy, who was from the Chicagoland area, who literally killed like 34 people. And there's belief that there was actually more victims, but they just haven't found them. And then the last one is Charles Manson. Now, Charles Manson is technically not a serial killer because he technically didn't kill anybody. But I thought it was important to put him into this category because he was doing some things that were kind of categorized as, serial killer. He actually had an occult, and he had these people follow him and gave them instructions to kill these people in a very brutal way. And let me just say this, and then when I say this, I'm going to explain why I said this. Out of those three individuals, I actually kind of felt sorry for Charles Manson. Now, initially people be like, what are you talking about? This guy ordered these people to slaughter these people. And that's true. But I did a little research, or actually, whenever we do talk shows like this, I do some extensive research, or my staff do. So we don't get on here and look like idiots and giving wrong information. But unfortunately, with Charles Manson's situation, he was the son of a 15-year-old woman. She had him, Charles Manson's mom had him when he was 15. At age 17, she was actually at that point having or turning tricks in her small apartment. And little Charles Manson was actually forced to witness his mom perform all types of sex acts on these men. And of course, that would more or less make a young child disturbed, to say the least. And it got to the point where she realized she couldn't take care of him and tried to get rid of him and send him off to a reformatory school. And even in spite of that, he had his love for his mom, and he ran away from the reformatory school and came back, and his mom rejected him. And at that point, that's when I think Charles Manson said F the world, became a criminal, did what he wanted to do, lived just about his entire life in and out of jail. He even once said that jail was home to him and he didn't want to leave. So it's unfortunate. I do believe that if Charles Manson had grew up in a typical white suburbanite lifestyle with a mother and a father, hardworking father, that he would have not turned out that way. But unfortunately, the world would never know because he went south as a result of his foundation. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe and get his opinion on these three individuals.
Charles Manson era was right during that hippie era.
Yeah.
And a lot of people who were looking for followers, like a lot of people still look for followers, church, whatever it might be.
And even more so then.
Yeah, even more so then. People were going with Rada, Buddhism.
The Dalai Lama.
The Dalai Lama, all
even
that.
the Beatles, I believe, followed the Dalai Lama.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Went there and studied under his teaching.
Right.
Yeah.
And
smoked a lot of grass.
They smoke a lot of grass. LSD, peyote, hashish, all that. Come think about it. In some parts of India, marijuana is a religious right. They passed. That's off the subject. Mm-hmm. Anyway, Charles Manson was brought up in an era of free love. At that time, I had several young women would follow my word, and I think it had a lot to do with the Vietnam War because a lot of men were pushed out into this war.
Yeah.
So a lot of young women were looking for some kind of male influence. And some people who get power don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And sometimes sex and violence go together.
Yeah. And a lot of times they abuse power when they have an excessive amount of it.
Right. And then some people, they all of a sudden they get this deity thing. They think they're earthly gods. Mm-hmm. And being an earthly god, you can do what you want to do. Yeah. Even if he wasn't saying it in his head. Yeah. Most of his little dominions were all women.
Yeah, and he was very delusional. He was, because what a lot of people don't realize about Charles Manson, and then we go over to these other two individuals too, is Charles Manson the reason why he ordered those people to do what they did, and they downplayed this. Charles Manson was actually trying to create a race war, and he was going to blame those murders on black people. And he believed in his mind that there was going to be a revolt, and black people was going to fight white people, and black people were going to win, and he was going to hide out in the desert until all the white folks are just about dead, and the black people walk around ruling the state or the country. And he said this nonsense. Black people would not be able to deal with the reins of power, so he would emerge with a few of the white people that survived and take back over the power and send, quote unquote, Darky back to the cotton fields. That's actually what he said. So it was based upon that whole nonsense, and the murders were based upon trying to create a race riot, and he would rule the country or the world. So he was quite delusional.
He was more in delusion. Like I said, drugs had a lot to do with it. Now, in California at that time, I used to go to California. There was a lot of delusional people who didn't have families.
Yeah.
You know, but they didn't result to mass murder.
Yeah, they did.
You know.
So now we're going to kind of move along because we spent a great deal on Charles Manson. We actually could have done a whole entire show on him.
Yeah.
But I think what made
Excuse me.
Dahmer and Gacy, their behavior was very similar, because basically what they were trying to do was hide the fact that they had homosexual tendencies. And back in the 60s, you know, for John Wayne Gacy, it was not acceptable. I mean, unfortunately, we live in times that some people just won't accept other people's sexuality. Me personally, my thoughts on that is to each his own. It's not for me to judge you because that's your thing. So, you know, that's your thing. It's not for me to say, I don't like this and you should convert to another way of living. But in the 60s, it was unheard of to be walking around with another man in a sexual situation. So I think John Wayne Gacy went to the extreme extent to try to hide and suppress the fact that he liked the young boys.
Again, that's another part of my era. They had a homosexual walk in Lincoln Park back in the city, back in the 60s in Chicago.
Okay.
It was called, no better word to say, it was called Fag Hill. If you walked through there, you saw homosexuals laid out, and they would give you little cat calls. And that's how I learned about it, because I was walking around one day and went up there, and hey baby, you know, all that. You know, I noticed there were several homosexual poet laureates would hang out at the. I don't want to name them, but people who into poetry and literature know who these people are.
Yeah.
You know. Homosexuality been with us for a long time, and it does create a lot of violence, because violence is put on homosexuals. At one time, you could whoop a homosexual ass, especially in the 50s. Nobody would say anything, like whooping a black man's butt.
It was actually cheered. They cheered that nonsense on back
You're a
then.
real man if you kicked that heel fast.
Yeah.
And San Francisco, they had particular places for homosexuals. But like any human being, they have flaws. They have flaws. Most of the homosexuals I've met who were friends, some of them were friends, they had this self-hate thing, you know. They had this self-hate thing. They didn't fit in anywhere. Their families, especially in the 60s, their families would put them out.
Yeah.
You know, it was across the board. Poor, rich, black, white, Italian, Jews. The kids would, you know, I had a homosexual friends whose parents supported them as long as they stayed away from their family.
Yeah.
Now, the murder thing come in from being angry and
Well, I think
disenfranchised.
Yeah, well, I think in Gacy's case, it was just basically trying to conceal the fact that
Right.
was his sexuality. Jeffrey Dahmer was similar but more bizarre. Jeffrey Dahmer basically wanted a sex slave, and he actually experimented on these people and literally drilled holes in their heads and put acid in it to try to put them in a zombie state. I mean,
Lobotomy.
yeah, I
He
mean,
tried to
Jeffrey
lobotomize.
Dahmer was a very disturbed man.
Yeah.
And what was so unique about his situation versus Gacy was Gacy came from a family structure where his father was very strict and very abusive.
Blue collar.
Right, but Jeffrey Dahmer's dad was had a master's degree in chemistry, intelligent man, never had any issues with his son, never treated his son badly, had a pretty good childhood. So that leads me to believe that, and we talked about this off air as far as what make people do what they do. And sometimes I believe that they're just defects. That's just like with In the supermarket, when you produce manager, you check the fruit to make sure that there's not any sour ones in there, any ones that got bugs in there, and you toss them out.
Yeah.
I think it's the same thing with the human body, that it's, every now and then, just the law of average, there's a defect and there's something that's not clicking and working properly, because regular folks don't have the desire to go stockpile dead people and just kill people at random for your own sexual pleasure. We just don't do that.
Sometimes I think when they had that sexual act with this male child, because most of them were children, if you're 22 years old, you're still a child.
Yeah. And actually, Jeffrey Dahmer's youngest victim, who almost got away, and the police sent the young boy, 14-year-old boy, back into the house when he was roaming around out in the street, and somebody called and said, hey, there's a young man out here beat up, bruised up, naked. You need to come see about him. And when they came, Jeffrey Dahmer showed up on the scene and said, oh, this is my lover who was 18 years old. We just had a domestic issue. And the cops thought it was, that's what it was.
Bothered with that.
Yeah. Now, here's the problem that I have with that scenario. Even if that was the case, if you're naked in the street and beat up, I think that the cops need to take you away for a day and just kind of get the idea of what was going on there.
They would have did it if it was a young girl or a woman, a female.
Yeah, and they should have done it because they say, or he was 14, that boy. Not too many 14-year-olds look like 18-year-olds.
No.
I seen the pictures of this young guy, and he didn't look no more than what he was. But I know that, cops cannot read into until they know what the situation is. But sometimes you got to dig a little deeper just to make sure, for the sake of making sure that everything is okay. And what was interesting about Gacy, that they were so complex with him because he didn't fit any psychological profiles, that when he died, when they finally executed him, they actually cut his brain out and examined it to see was there any type of visual, physical abnormalities, and they found nothing. So it leads you to believe that, every now and then you run across an individual that just something didn't get developed. And as a result of that, they have these abnormal compulsions or obsessions to do heinous things. Because again, most of us walking around don't want to store dead body parts in our refrigerator and go and eat them. There's some foods that I don't like, so I know I'm not trying to stockpile human parts and eat it.
I think I read or saw on TV that they came up with this theory. He ate people to keep a part of with him.
Well, according to the trial testimony, and these were his words, that keeping parts of them and eating them kept them alive in his mind and kept them close. It's just unthinkable, the things that these two people did, because personality-wise, they were a little different. Dahmer was more or less docile and kind of quiet and laid back, and John Wayne Gacy was more forceful, more outgoing, and literally bullied some of his victims before he murdered them.
Yeah, I had gotten in the trades, and I had did some off jobs for him back before I went up to Canada. I didn't go into his household, but he handed me monies. I had met him, and he worked with other people. I would see him at a distance, but I didn't have a really. And then when I got back to the States, I started hearing about this man. Then I realized that I had met him. Yeah. But my personality, I think he was looking for docile and weak people.
Oh yeah, that's the MO of a predator. Yeah. You don't go out looking for somebody that's going to be able to size you up and stand toe to toe with you. You find these very usually young and naive people, because John Wayne Gacy, for the most part, MO was he lured these people with money and promises of a better paying job. And what I found that's interesting when, me and my staff did our research was, and I've seen this before and I'm going to say this, as an observation of a black man. Now, John Wayne Gacy came from like a middle class family. His father didn't care for him because of, he felt he'd seen the sexuality and he didn't like it. Then John Wayne Gacy went on his own about 17 or 18, I believe, and got involved with the JCs, became involved with these other organizations, and started coming up through the ranks as far as power. And his first, problem was the 15-year-old boy that he sodomized, and he claimed it was consensual, and the courts weren't trying to believe that or hear that nonsense, so they sentenced him to 10 years in the penitentiary. Now, most of us as black men if we get 10 years in the pen, when we come out, our life is over.
Over.
It's hard to find a job, let alone a
Anything.
good job. But it's interesting that a lot of these white folks can go to jail for these heinous situations and come back and brush the and
start
get back
over.
in and start over, become successful. I mean, that's wonderful because you don't want anybody released from prison going back and doing the same thing and going back and becoming a burden to society. But what I'm saying, the point I'm making is it would be nice for black people that unfortunately get in situations that allow or force them to be incarcerated, that they come out and can get a good start. You know, that's the point I'm making. You know, because I noticed, I'm like, man, 10 years in the penitentiary, and then he went out
Yeah,
and
I didn't even know that.
yeah, and he was quite successful with this real estate business or
Yeah,
construction.
construction, yeah.
Yeah, and this, you know, this was after the jail sentence, not before. So,
Well,
you know,
that-
I just find it interesting.
That probably had to do something with family monies.
Well, his family kind of disassociated themselves. But I believe that, you know, white people are given opportunities regardless of what happened to them in the past. And I'm not knocking that. This is not a racial statement. It's just an observation that black people, we don't get that same opportunity.
No.
You know, we get 2 years in jail and then they do our background checks. Oh, no. You know, but this guy did a decade in jail and was able to come back in and, you know, set the world on fire business-wise and become a very successful businessman.
I think that had a lot to do with capital,
Yeah.
having some monies to invest.
Well,
And when you got money, money cover black and white.
absolutely.
You know,
And John Wayne Gacy got around. There was pictures of him with powerful people,
Yeah.
even Jimmy Carter's wife. So,
that's what money does.
yeah, money can put you back in the game or keep you in the game.
Yeah, they keep you
and
in-
lack of money, you can't get in the game.
And that's why a lot of children, people's children, are laying in some shallow grave. Oh, he's so and so and so and so. It's basically society's fault.
Yeah.
If you see little boys going to some place and nobody coming out, somebody had to say, well, he went in there, he never came out.
Yeah. I mean, we have to, pay close attention to our children. I mean, it's better to be overcautious than
Yeah.
under, you know, and that's just how it should be, where we are very observant and very protective of our children because they're just some kids that walk into situations that they had no business walking in because there was no adult to supervise
Right.
their whereabouts. I mean, we talked about this before off camera about how we see this trend, and we kind of getting off the subject, but got to say this trend where these young kids are taking these smaller kids to school.
Yeah.
When both of these kids should have an adult with them taking them to school.
Right.
You know, but
This is not the 50s.
yeah.
In a close-knit neighborhood.
Right. And we talked about this, and the majority of our talk shows are this particular subject is always tied in. The lack and the breakdown of the black family structure. You know, when you got a mom and dad at home, between the two of them, somebody gonna get you to school.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I never married my baby's daddies, and grandmama's kind of still looking after me, and I got to send my kids off to school because I'm doing something else, so I got to go to work, you know. So it's unfortunate that we starting to see these things that are very disturbing as far as small kids walking themselves, small kids walking the smaller kids to school.
You don't know how prevalent it is. Sometimes I'm out at 6:30.
And you see these little kids.
These little kids with their little backpacks.
Right,
I
little
gotta go
kids.
Well, what?
Yeah, little kids, not teenagers. We're talking little kids.
8,
Yeah, and it's like
9.
when you have your children, I know most of them, or some of them are never not planned, but you still got to figure out, put together a game plan. Say, okay, I got a child coming. Who's going to take him to school or her to school? Who's going to pick them up? You know, but some of us, you know, when we 16 and having kids, we don't think because we still kids ourselves.
They were looking for somebody to lead them, to guide them, and I was floored by that.
Yeah. And now touching back on, because we kind of swing back off the topic, but they all kind of tied in.
Yeah.
But as far as Charles Manson to me, what I don't like, and I use him as a good example, we live in a country that we sensationalize horrific things.
Yeah.
You know, when Charles Manson did what he did, and even still up until this day, you know, they interviewing him, they doing stories on him.
Movies,
Yeah, and I'm like,
action dolls.
exactly. Well, and if they thought they could get away with it, they would.
But
But it's appalling to me that this man is given airtime when that airtime that he's given can be given to an organization that's trying to do something positive for the
Yeah.
community and the country, as opposed to it's a whole 2 hours of him talking, you know, crazy and somebody interviewing him. But we live in a society where we sensationalize this nonsense, and I would like to see that stop because unless it's beneficial to the average person to see this, which is not. I think he should be studied by psychiatrists,
And that's it.
psychologists, and that's it.
Yeah.
We don't need to see a 2-hour interview with a madman.
No.
You know, but I use him again as an example because they said this.
With tax dollars, feeding him, taking care of him,
Exactly.
keeping him medicated.
And
Yeah.
what I'm about to say feed right into what you said. It's interesting. I think one of the prosecutors for that case said this. How ironic that he's living better now than he was before he got incarcerated. Because when he came to California, he didn't have a dime in his pocket. The majority of his followers were bouncing back and forth with venereal diseases. They had lice. Now, this is documented. This is not me making this up. And when they got together with these people, and one of them was the Beach Boys, and they lived in this house, and they scared that man so bad that he didn't force them to leave or call the police. He left his own house. He abandoned his house, said, you can have it, and he left. So, you know, when you're dealing with some people that will scare you that much, you're dealing with some serious, crazy folks. And, you know, it's interesting, again, that he lived better now than he did when he was when he was a free man.
You
You
know,
know?
like I said, the '60s, everybody was looking for leaders. You know, they were telling what you say these phrases and blah blah blah, and that's what he was doing to these. You know, with LSD and a couple other drugs. You know, and I've seen people on speed, methadone, sulfur chloride. That crap is just horrible. And you mix LSD and speed together, you can get practically get people to do anything.
Yeah, and that's what he did. He was smart enough to find weak people.
Yeah.
Because the people that he grabbed into his occult or more or less coerced them, they were middle class people.
Yeah.
And by all accounts, supposedly intelligent people. But again, they were like 16 and 17 when
Yeah.
he scooped them up, and young folks follow other people.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is when they interview to this day the women that were a part of that, they're upset because Charles Manson is still claiming that he didn't had nothing to do with it. They did it of their own accord. It was their decision. He did not tell them nothing, which I believe is a lie. Because why would they do this if they didn't have any, reason to? And they're quite upset that, that he won't own up and fess up to the fact that he was a part of it. Because to this day, he still claims, I didn't tell nobody to do that.
That guru era was something else, man. That era, I used to have young women. When you come with me, I can show you the way that you can get this and you get. I said, well, hey, look at me. I'm so glad I'm from the ghetto. I didn't know what to do.
Yeah. Yes. Any closing remarks on the serial killers? And then we're gonna.
Serial killers gonna be out here. They've probably been out here since Jesus Christ days. Like these dudes on the street killing these little girls with. Shooting at little girls. They don't even shoot at men no more. They shoot at little girls. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're gonna be out here. They're part of society. They part of. They have to come up with some kind of way to weed them out.
Yeah.
Stop them before they can really do huge damage.
Okay. Well, basically, what I'm going to say quickly is, no one, I guess, will never know what makes people tick and what makes
Right.
them do those type of horrendous things. But we have to just pay attention to some of the warning signals from our people that we know and people that we have a slight association with. Don't take anything for granted because they could be stockpiling bodies in the house.
Yeah.
So just keep your eyes open, keep your ears open, and just try to make this a very livable place for everybody. And on that note, because we're running out of time, and I see our production assistant.
Hitler was a serial killer.
Well, Hitler was a maniac, and that's a whole nother topic.
He was
I'm
a
not
serial
going to talk
killer.
about him. Okay, we're going to wrap this show up, and hopefully this was a enlightening, or should I say informative segment. And as always, I thank you for coming to my channel, my talk show, Tell It Like It Is. I'm your host, Morris Man, and my co-host.
Joseph Spencer.
And until next time, keep thinking.